Thank you everyone for joining us today. Welcome to this month's Fielding Alumni Focus webinar. My name is Hillary Molina and I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Relations here at Fielding, and it is my distinct pleasure to welcome today's special guest, Maryanne Spatola. Just a little bit of an introduction about what these webinars are all about. So the goal of our Alumni Focus webinars is truly to connect and engage with our Fielding community all over the world on topics related to the mission, vision, and values of Fielding. But the conversation does not stop here. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel, which is called Fielding Alumni Relations. So before we get started today, I'd like to share with you how this webinar will work. First of all, you don't have to worry about your camera or your microphone at all. The only people that you will see or hear is myself and Maryanne. So you get to relax and enjoy, but that doesn't mean that you don't get to engage. You do have the opportunity to ask questions by using the Q&A function, and that's in the drop-down menu at the top of your screen. At any point, if you have a question, we will be able to see it, and either one of us can respond via text or answer it live. Plus, we have a few poll questions throughout the webinar, which will pop up and remain open for a few minutes, so we thank you in advance for participating with that. So that's it for instructions. Now, I would like to introduce you to today's featured presenter, Maryanne Spatola. Maryanne is a graduate of our evidence-based coaching for organization leadership here at Fielding, and I'd like to share a little bit about Maryanne and her background. She is a human resource executive who achieves business results through the alignment of talent, culture, and strategy. She's engaging, influential, and very much an energetic leader. She is a trusted confidant and strategic advisor to executive management and business leaders at all levels. She's an integrator of talent processes, systems, and technologies, and is a collaborative relationship builder. Currently, she serves as Senior Vice President, Chief Human Resources Officer for Solix, Inc., which is based out of New Jersey. She's responsible for overseeing all human resource functions. Prior to joining Solix, she served as Vice President of Organizational Effectiveness and Leadership at Selective Insurance. In addition, Maryanne has held a number of senior human resource positions throughout her career at Chubb Insurance, the Chubb Institute, and Crum & Foster. She earned her bachelor's in social sciences from Thomas Edison State College and earned her master's of science degree in human resources with a concentration in organizational effectiveness from New York University, where she is also an adjunct faculty member. Maryanne, it is my pleasure to have you with us today, so I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Thank you, Hillary. That was a warm introduction. I hope I can live up to all of that. So welcome, everybody. I'm very excited to be here this evening and chat with you a little bit about a session that I'm calling Navigating the Talent Tsunami. And it's about building capability, capacity, and connection in your workforce. And the title is intentional. Many of my colleagues have described the workforce challenges that they face today as overwhelming, tumultuous, and uncertain, very much like a tsunami brings. So the session this evening is intended to explore and share some trends from recent research mixed with a practitioner point of view on solutions and tools. And so I will offer to you as we go through this presentation some of the tools I actually have used in various roles that I've been in to help us navigate this new workforce that we're up against. So the three things we're really going to cover this evening will include learning techniques for discovering and aligning capabilities across your workforce to achieve your business goals. We'll talk about how to uncover hidden opportunities for added capacity from your workforce and discover the power of creating connections to empower collaboration and innovation amongst your workforce. So how can you make the most out of this session? I think in order for us to uncover what I'll call hidden insights, there's a couple of things I would ask you to do. One is to be curious about what others are doing and learn from your colleagues in the virtual room. And we'll have opportunity as we go through the session to stop for some poll questions where we'll get to know who you are a little bit further and understand what your needs are. And at the end, we're going to ask you to share with us what insights you've taken from tonight's session as a way to help each other learn and grow. The second is to suspend judgment. So let's have an open mind with some new ideas you may hear about and different ways of thinking. And lastly, to really stretch yourself. To move beyond where you are is where the growth will occur, and a lot of times that becomes uncomfortable. So we will ask you to do that, and if you feel a little uncomfortable as we go through certain topics, that's a good thing. So I hope that happens for you. So the first poll question I'd like to ask is to understand what attracted you to this session. So the options include, I want to learn more about leveraging the multi-generational workforce in my organization. Maybe it's because you found the topic is interesting and you want to learn more. It may be because you're experiencing multi-generational workforce challenges, or maybe you just didn't have anything better to do on a Tuesday night, and that's okay too. So Hillary is going to open the poll question up, and then we'll give you a few minutes to respond to that. So let's see if I can see what the polling responses are.
All right, so I'll go ahead and jump back on. Can you hear me okay, Maryanne?
I can.
Okay, great. So we got a couple of responses back, and since you can't see it, I'll go ahead and let you know what it is. So far, the vast majority of everyone says the topic is interesting to me and I would like to learn more, followed by I want to learn more about leveraging the multi-generational workforce in my organization. And there is no one who said they had nothing better to do on a Tuesday night.
Well, that's a good thing. That's a really good thing. Thank you, Hillary. All righty. So I'm glad to hear that people are finding the topic interesting. You know, sometimes I wonder when we talk about multi-generational, you know, is it going to start to get old? There's certainly been a lot of discussion around millennials and baby boomers and how we are or aren't working effectively together. And I'll share my point of view about it and some tools and interesting things that we've used to try and help leverage all generations in the workforce, all in line with achieving our strategic goals. So I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for answering the poll. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to do is just spend a little bit of time anchoring ourselves on what the generations actually are and how they're researched and talked about. So the first thing to understand is demographers are the folks who do this type of work, and they study what the world events are during our formative years, generally between the ages of 10 and 16. And they look at how those world events will shape our values, our beliefs, and the way we see the world around us, both at work and at home. And so you'll see these age groups, and there are a number of demographers in the space. One of my favorites is Tammy Erickson. But you'll notice that there's a general age range, give or take a year or two, depending on the demographer who's done the research. So if we go from left to right, you have the traditionalists born between 28 and 45. Some recent research I read indicated that we have a growing population of 75 and older who are actively in the workforce full-time and still working. So that would be, in this bucket, in this genre. And what we know about them is they came up in the early war years, and that shaped a lot of how they view things and how they think about things. It was also the era of the Great Depression. There was not a lot of wealth that was spread around the US. And what we saw in this group that they call the traditionalists is a lot of respect for authority. It's that military hierarchical view. very loyal to institutions. They were rule makers and conformists, and so they just followed the drill. And this was a time period where people went to work. It was, the industrial age. There were many factories. Women did not work generally. And you went to a job and you started at the bottom and you worked your way up, and that's probably the only place you ever worked. Then you have the boomers, also the baby boomers they're called, typically born between 46 and 64. And if you think about that time period, we had civil unrest, we had the civil rights movements, we had this big anti-authoritarian type of environment in which people were growing up. Very idealistic. Competitive was another way to describe this. And they got their moniker of baby boomer because that war generation, after the war was over, decided to have a lot of babies. And so that's where that came from. And until the millennials came along, this was the largest cohort group in population. Then we have Gen Y, born typically between 65 and 77. And this is where you start to see some change in viewpoint about women coming into the workplace. You started to see a little bit of that with the boomers, but with Gen X group, it wasn't uncommon for moms to be working. This was the dual income that started to rise. These are the folks that grew up seeing workaholic parents who stayed at the job to all hours and extents just to advance their careers. And they also lived through a period where we started to see some distrust of institutions, more rule morphing, in other words, make it my way. These were also called the me generation, if you remember that label. But very dedicated to their parents. This was another interesting shift. In the boomer generation, when they dropped their kids, when they were dropped off to college, shall we say, it was drive up in the station wagon, drop off your suitcases at the curb, and goodbye, I'll see you in 4 years. When you have the Gen X, and even worse at the Gen Y, go off to college, I know when my sons went off to college, they offered me a separation anxiety course to help the parent separate from the children. So it's just a very different generation. The Gen X also is the first time we start to see this information savvy technology slant in a generational profile. When you move to the Gen Y, this is the millennial group. You've also seen them referred to as millennial. Again, they are the next largest cohort, and they are actively in the workplace. And the things you notice about them are confident, they're full of self-esteem, and there are some very positive attributes about this group and some very negative generalizations that have been made about this group. Trophy children, everybody gets a prize, they don't want to work. There's a lot of what I believe, or we're starting to form some stereotypes, which can get pretty dangerous. But very tech savvy, coming into the workplace and finding opportunities. They're expecting opportunities. You hear a lot of that. And the boomers and the traditionalists aren't necessarily going away. So the opportunities they thought they would find aren't happening as quickly, and they're getting frustrated. The last group is the Gen Z. Some demographers have also profiled them as Next Gen or Gen 2020. So you may see some different labels for those. What I think is interesting about the way they're described is that first bullet, they're digitally dependent. And I have a little video clip I'll share with you, but if anybody has children in this age bracket, they are attached to their technology. And that's pretty much what we're seeing in this group. And frankly, it's spreading to other generations as well. But they tend to be very entrepreneurial, hyper multitasking, meaning very distracted by the technology, and they live in this world of social media, which is also impacting the way work gets done in businesses. So I share this with you because I think it's helpful for us to have this context as we begin to talk about building capabilities, capacity, and connection in your workforce as a way to weave together what each of these generations has to offer in your organization, because there are many, and how do we really begin to leverage it instead of worrying about what's not working, finding ways to make it work. So we're going to stop here and do poll question number 2. I'm curious to know, which generation do you belong to? Do you feel like you affiliate with out of the ones that are on this chart? So let's take a minute and give you a chance to respond to that.
Okay, Maryanne, it looks like people are just finishing up here, and right now it is split right down the middle between Baby Boomer and Gen X.
Oh, very good. Good. And I hope this stuff is resonating with you as we go. So that's interesting to hear. The other interesting thing about the generations, again, it is predominantly this age range of when you were born. What I've also heard people say, and I had the privilege of hearing Tammy Emerson speak at a conference once, and she described it really as, what generation do you affiliate with based on the attributes, and especially those of us who may be on the cusp of these generational groupings, you may better relate to the group that you're not necessarily born into. So for me, I would also fall in that boomer category, but I have defected into the Gen X because I relate more to the Gen X attributes. So you can feel free to do that as well. Okay, so we did that already. I'm going to show this little clip of what's happening in the workplace, and it has a viewpoint from people who are in these different generations. So let me bring that up for you. And we're going to give this a play.
Millennial, Gen X.
Looks like the video is not showing.
It's like my kid. If they forget the phone, it's like they're going to die.
Maryanne, the screen is only showing your PowerPoint, not the video, so you just got to switch over to the share.
All we have is
Switch over to...
So stop sharing the PowerPoint and then
sorry.
go. Yeah, no problem.
It's
Got it.
definitely my generation. I like
So let's do that again. Thanks for that, Hillary.
No problem.
Is it showing it now?
No, you just got to change the screen share to whichever window is open for the YouTube.
Change the screen share. Okay, did I lose it? There we go.
Still not showing yet.
Yep. Keynote Firefox. Is that working?
I think that's going to work. You got it.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Like my kid. If they forget the phone, it's like they're going to die.
My phone doesn't leave like a 6-inch radius from me. They're like, oh, these kids with their tech gadgets, and all we have is newspapers and abacus.
He just showed us the different generations because he couldn't remember.
That is definitely my generation. I like that.
I prefer a quick, right to the point answer, no back and forth email. I have a hard time adapting to sending emails. So sometimes my bosses get a little frustrated, but I'm a millennial. I check social media probably like 50 or 60 times a day. I mean, that's pretty serious, but yes, I would.
The ones that are in Gen X and then the baby boomers, they're a little bit more, don't want to be in the spotlight, where millennials like to be praised and they like that constant feedback.
I don't know about like not reading it entirely, but like definitely like
Skimming it. Great.
You're saying I wasted 4 hours? Multiple people, multiple generations looking at the same problem.
That's 4 different answers that may answer the same question, but in a different style.
Now you have so many new things to learn. Like, let's move on to the next thing.
It gave me a lot of thought into the different generations that work here. I mean, we need each other.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to go back to the presentation. And are we back online?
You got it, all set.
Beautiful, thank you. So that video really was a setup that supports my point of view and what I mean when I mentioned to you at the beginning of how do we really navigate this multi-generational workforce to enable the best performance from all different perspectives and points of view and taking full advantage of what each has to offer. So we're going to go through some trends now, and then I will begin to introduce some tools to you that I've used in different roles to help us pull together these different generational points of view and what the value is in doing that. So this is some global workforce trends that we're seeing. You know, diversity is on the rise throughout the organizational world, not just the gender, generational, cultural lines, but in companies' working arrangements and in lots of different ways. We also know that longer lifespans are likely to result in employees staying longer in the workplace, and that is what we're seeing. After the financial crisis, what happened for a lot of boomers and traditionalists was they had a pretty negative financial impact. So even if they could retire and wanted to retire, they couldn't afford to retire. And then when you add longer lifespans and people are healthier, you know, the new 40 is 50 or however that goes, people are really enjoying themselves. And the other piece to that is people are choosing to work differently. So the old view of what retirement was, you know, riding off into the sunset, has changed dramatically. AARP, which has the database of the largest over 50 population, has started their own vertical space on talent management, trying to help people who are having that second career after a full, what was viewed as full retirement. People continue to work. So they're coming back into the workforce after retiring out of their 30+ year career in a certain organization and continuing to work in other organizations. And AARP has made a whole revenue stream out of helping people do that. The other big change that we're starting to see is women are poised to enter the workplace in the developing world in vast numbers. And it's posing some really disparate challenges for companies that have failed to find a way or recognize how to fully develop and realize the potential of women in their organizations. I read some statistic not that long ago that women will outpace men in advanced degrees in the next, I think, 10 years. So we're out there in numbers, and we really need to find ways, especially in male-dominated industries, to help take advantage of that. We also need to rethink careers, and I mentioned to you earlier when we talked about the definitions of each generation that, you know, in the traditionalist bucket and in some of the baby boomer bucket, people worked for one company. That was the way it was. You started in a great company, you worked your way up, you were loyal to them, you were good to them, they were good to you, and that was all great. And that was then, and this is now. And the difference today is, and we see this a lot in millennial resumes, is they are more likely to move around. And in part because they've seen their parents and previous generations be loyal and it didn't pay off. Companies have outsourced. We went through a whole boom, if you recall, in the late 90s, where we began this mainstream push of offshoring. And if you were in a computer science job or in the information technology field, and you had a child who's going off to college and you've lost your job and can't find a job here, why would you tell your children to pursue that? There was actually a period where we saw a 39% dip in computer science degrees in colleges for that reason. So today, folks are more likely to change jobs. The statistics for our millennials and for Gen Zs coming in is that they will change jobs probably 11 to 15 times by the time they're 40. And they will change careers completely, meaning they worked in human resources and now I'm going to go do something else, or I was a nurse and I'm going to do something else, at least twice. So what's interesting about this statistic is the research report from, I believe, Manpower was talking about how bullish the millennials are about their careers and much more confident, I think, in their ability to secure a job. And they believe that if they had an opportunity to do so, they'd actually be better off by moving. And you have to give that some real credence, right? If you think about, if any of you have changed jobs, if you make a move within your organization to get a promotion, you typically get 5, maybe 7%. It takes time to be invested in that company, 3 or 5 or 7 years to get that promotion. If you change jobs to a new organization every 2, 3, 5 years, you're going to jump anywhere between 10, 15, and 20% in your salary. So they might be onto something as a way to advance their career, develop new opportunities, challenging opportunities, and make more money while they're at it. So let's first talk about what capabilities are and what is this notion of capabilities. Capability remains at the top of strategic priorities in almost every research report I read. Everything from the CEO challenge, from conference board to corporate executive board research. There's tons of research out there. Capabilities remains at the top of CEOs and organizations' priority list. The lack of learning performance metrics is one of the biggest barriers to capability building. So our ability to measure the impact of learning and performance continues to get in our way. We have to get better at doing that. And if you look at some of the research that's put out by I4CP, they profile best performing organizations. And a lot of what you'll read in their research is best performing organizations are linking learning objectives to strategic business objectives. So this is that alignment of the capability piece. And it's making sure that people have that strategic capability in order to deliver on the organizational goals. When you look at generations at a glance, and if we take on that left-hand column, what you'll see is some of the attributes for each generation and what they might bring to the table. So you saw in that little video clip, they talked about how each generation has a different style and approach. Some of those things are characterized here, and I wanted to include this chart as a way for you to start thinking about how you can create groups, and we'll talk about on the last slide an approach to creating learning and solving business problems collectively, but how you might think about crafting groups of individuals who work together, cross-functional teams, whatever that may be, and what we call bringing the unlikely suspects together. And so that would be taking a look at your populations, looking at the generations they belong to or you believe they belong to, thinking about the attributes of each of those, and maybe applying this chart, and then making some selections about who needs to be on a particular team in order to bring these things to light and help foster the different kind of conversations and influence the outcomes you want to get. So the other piece of capability is thinking about it as an organizational capability. And in its simplest terms, what I mean by that is anything that the organization does well collectively that drives meaningful business results. So quick example would be Southwest with customer service. That's what they're known for. They are unique to an organization. They define the skills and knowledge that's all fundamental to the organization and its performance. And they also tend to differentiate your organization in the marketplace. And we know that's a big advantage for success. So one of the things I wanted to share with you in this session was to talk about how do you start that conversation in your organization? And one of the ways to do that is to frame strategic capability questions that you might ask within your organization. Sometimes this happens informally through conversations. Other times it may happen through facilitated meetings and workshops. But some of the things that you can start to do to think about this is to say, in 3 years, if we think about our business 3 years from now, and we're winning in the industry, why are we winning? What do we look like as an organization? What does our industry look like? What differentiates us from our competitors? And if we think about, that 3 years from now and we're winning, that would imply some of our competitors have failed. So what happened to them? Why did they fail? And you can start to frame some questions like this to drive a different conversation. And this is a tool that I've used that has helped to foster this. I've used this with executive teams to help us really get a handle on what those critical capabilities are for our organization. So the way this works is you can imagine the template you'll see there as capability, effectiveness, and criticality as a blank sheet. And in those boxes that are now numbered 1 through 6, you would certainly fill in what those capabilities are for your organization. For me at the time, in the organization I worked in, these were our 6 top capabilities we believed we needed to have in order to achieve our strategic plan and win in the marketplace. They included things like branding and marketing, making sure we had a good, strong brand presence. It included things like making sure we had M&A capability because part of our strategic growth plan was to do acquisitions. We knew that technology and ease of doing business was really critical, both internally and externally, because we had a platform that was available for our clients to use. And if it wasn't easy for them to use, it wouldn't help us. So we filled in that first row there around what are those capabilities that we needed to have. And then the 2 columns to the right were a rating scale for effectiveness and criticality on a 1 to 5, low to high. And we would ask our executives to fill this out. So it was an interview process we went through initially. We talked them through. We asked them to rate them and give us their feedback and perspective on how well we were doing with these capabilities and how critical they were to our overall strategic plan. So what we did then was create a quadrant analysis. And what that helps us to do, if anybody's worked in organizational effectiveness or organizational design or development, you know that you need to know how to do a 2x2 or a 4-box as it's also called. But it's a nice little format. It's a great visual tool, and it helps you place, based on the effectiveness and criticality scales, how those results of effectiveness and criticality in terms of scores pan out. And so this is what it looked like for us. And you can see, based on our scores, M&A came in as low effectiveness, meaning we weren't all that great at it. but it wasn't high on criticality. It actually came in low at the time because we weren't prepared to make the investments we needed to in order to make that happen. However, if you look at ease of technology, to ease of doing business, we weren't very good at that. It was low on effectiveness, but it was very critical to our success. So that was an area we made some investments in to help us grow the business. We were very good at our investments, but it wasn't high on the criticality. It was lower on that scale. And branding and marketing was an area we were doing really well with. And so what we wanted to make sure was we didn't break that as we planned for these other strategic initiatives. So you want to make sure you keep doing what you're doing well and then adding and growing as you go. The next topic is capacity. And capacity is really the way to uncover hidden opportunities to find capacity. Capacity is really all about helping people find ways to do more, finding ways for people to use that discretionary effort in a way that generates meaningful business results and helps people advance. So it's a way to generate innovation in your organization. In order to do that, people need to have a little bit of that white space where they can do more and take more on. Innovation leadership brings around new thinking and different actions on how you lead and manage and go about getting work done. And leaders need to know how to create an organizational climate where others can apply innovative thinking to solve problems and develop new products. You'll see at the end of the presentation, there is a works cited list, and a lot of the articles where I'm citing research I've listed for you. So if you want to go do the reading or find those, you can do that. This is an interesting one, I thought, which is the myth about millennial capacity. So you hear a lot of this kind of rhetoric about they don't like to work long hours. And in fact, what the research is finding is it's quite different. They're actually working, long hours, if you will, but how they choose to work those hours and when they work those hours are different, right? So it's really about understanding how work gets done and not being stuck on the traditional older perspective on management, which is butts in seats. And if they're not in their chair from 9 to 5, they can't possibly be working. So this was an interesting piece of research that begins to challenge that thinking. The other piece that we know is learning is really the fuel for adding capacity. More than 8 in 10 executives view learning as important in these different research studies. This was an interesting line that I picked up. The learning curve is the earning curve. And so people are understanding that the more they learn, the more they can earn over time. And getting that visibility and exposure from learning opportunities is helping them grow. High-performing organizations do link their learning objectives to added capacity for achieving results. And learning from experimentation is really important. You read a lot about being agile in your work environment, in your workplace, and that really breeds both capacity and innovation. This was an interesting piece as well. So we all saw the crazy Pokemon Go that was very prominent last summer. But innovation really has become the engine that drives both business growth and performance in organizations. And if you look at the entry of the Pokemon Go, you'll realize how important innovation leadership is for business success. The ability to quickly innovate is rapidly replacing our static 5-year strategic plans and requires new types of leadership in organizations to do that. Innovative leadership is about bringing in that new thinking, and leadership for innovation is really about creating the environment within your organizations where innovation can thrive through divergent thinking and solutions. And also we know that technology is disrupting and enabling learning all at the same time. So I wanted to share these three relatively new startup companies, and I'm not sure if you've heard them before. One of them is called Better Up Coaching. It's a brand new startup. They've got a huge, I want to say 12 million invested in from a private equity firm. And Better Up Coaching is all about real-time development. They're aligned with ICF. Their model and platform is to provide 30-minute coaching sessions on a weekly basis through an app that is recorded, tracked, and measured for performance. So pretty cool, very innovative, and really bringing new technology, both disruption and enablement to learning. PathGather is another one, which is really a talent platform that's mobile. It's in the moment. It leverages social networks and mentoring and coaching opportunities, provides resources at their fingertips. So again, playing to this new world that millennials like to live and play in. The other one is called Everwise, and it's a new way to think about workplace mentoring. Again, it's all technology driven, app-based, real-time feedback and in the moment, coaching opportunities, mentoring opportunities, and they've got segmented populations they're targeting, like women and millennials. So it's just interesting to see all the changes that are coming into the workplace and the work environment that are bringing the opportunities for added capacity and learning. The last piece is connection, and empowering collaboration and innovation through connections is really about creating the pathways, if you will, for breakthrough performance when it comes to leveraging employee networks and how we get work done through and with others in your organizations. And there's a piece of work from Corporate Leadership Council, Corporate Executive Board, that they referred to as networked performance. And what they did this study on was to really understand how work is getting done across organizations, and the days of silos where people just work in their own functional areas and not work with others is quickly becoming outpaced. And you can see here from the little chart on the left, there's, in these studies that they've reported, 67% of people are on different teams, people at different job levels, people in different locations, people outside of my department or function. So all of these perspectives are being sought after and worked through in order for people to get their work done and get better outcomes. So the way in which work gets done inside organizations is also rapidly changing, and it's requiring us to work closer and closer on a more integrated basis with different employees across your organizations. So this is another prominent technique, and you may or may not be familiar with this, but it's a concept called action learning. Action learning is a way to take your real business problems to the table and fold in the element of learning. And so it centers on solving a problem, a project, a challenge, an issue, or a task, something that is really important to the individual, the team, or the organization. And the problem should be significant, it should be urgent, and it should be the responsibility of the team to solve. Action learning really emphasizes questions and reflection, so rather than statements and opinions. And it's a way to really accelerate the development of leaders and solve business problems all at the same time. And it's a really cool methodology. What you can do with it, and this is a model of how you can frame action learning projects in your organization for any type of work that you're trying to get done. And what I like about this model is you can both right size it for your need, and you can scale parts on and parts off to help you address your specific needs and customize it for your organization. So there's just a couple key things I want to point out. First and foremost is bringing together these diverse teams is the key. So like we saw with all of the different generations, thinking about what each of them brings to the table, and by design, introducing teams that will represent different generations, different perspectives, different points of view, really brings the best result to the solution. It also tends to accelerate the leadership development with a business impact. So if you look at the model that's on the screen, if you go from left to right, there's a pre-work phase to it, so you can set up the project appropriately, a problem diagnosis, if you will. One of the things I like to do when I create these types of opportunities is to have both internal and external thought leaders. And again, this is a function of budget and what you can afford to do. You can have all of these parts or some of these parts. The internal thought leaders tend to be the folks in the organization that are respected, that are strategic, that can bring that innovative leader thinking to the table and really rally the group to work on this project. External thought leaders are really valuable to bring in some outside in thinking. Again, another catalyst for driving innovation and helping people to think about their problems differently, how to solve problems differently. You might have working sessions to help people work through these projects. You can also frame it in successions of weeks over time so that they have a time period by which to get it done. It doesn't have to be necessarily in a programmatic form. It can simply be a month-to-month meeting with the people in the group and helping them do that. There's also a peer learning team, if you will, or oftentimes an action coach that helps the group think through problems, not solve problems for them, but serves as a partner and a thought leader to help them shape their recommendations and to solve the business problem. And the other thing we've done sometimes is to have the action learning teams make presentations back to senior leaders. Sometimes we set them up as competitions where there's actually fund money or seed money available for a little popcorn experiment to start a new business or a project, and different reward structures that can, help keep people incentivized to want to work on these types of programs. So I'm going to stop talking there and ask Hillary if she could come back in, and we could take your responses either through chat or through the QA feature. But I'm curious to hear from you. What was your most relevant insight that you got from this session, and or what do you think you might be able to take back to your organization for any initiatives that you're working on?
Hi, Maryanne. It looks like my camera decided to take a nap right now, so I will just go ahead and be the voice from beyond. So thank you so much. I wrote down a couple of questions myself to go ahead and get started, because there was so much information in here that was just fascinating. So the first question that I had really goes back to the various generations that we're talking about, and the stark contrast between the baby boomer and Gen Z is pretty different. And so I was just curious, what recommendations do you have, or maybe some real-time examples of what you've come across to help these two generations really process their work together? And then in a follow-up question to that, specifically for an example, is giving and providing feedback, because that was a big difference between the two. So I just would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So quick funny story. The first time I ran a summer intern program was in 2008. And we had, it was the first time we launched it for our organization. It was your classic college programs, summer internships, give them a chance to do some great work. And we got a chance to build a pipeline. Our executive team did not believe me when I described the helicopter parents who would be there. And sure enough, they were. But what we quickly realized as we built that summer intern program was our first glance at that Gen Z, Gen Y at the time, and wanting to understand their perspective. So what we did was to try and understand, again, from a business standpoint, this group would potentially be consumers of some of our products. So we created a reverse mentoring program where our senior most executives, who tended to be traditionalists or baby boomer generation, would have lunch with our summer interns once a week, rotated through the whole population of summer interns, and ask them questions about their view on insurance, their view on buying habits, and all those types of things. So it helped us to really understand how they think, what was important to them, and at the same time, they got a chance to ask questions about career and business, and it was a very nice exchange, and we learned a lot from them in terms of how they viewed insurance. So that was very helpful. The feedback piece is an interesting one. I think we hear a lot about that, not only from millennials, from Gen X as well. And frankly, if you're following all of the research that's going on now and the upheaval on performance management, it is all about feedback. And really, the heart of the issue is our ability to give quality feedback in a timely manner that helps people be their best, to perform at their best. And I think all generations have an interest in that. Where the rub tends to come in is the frequency of the different generations who are asking for it. And so we're finding different ways at my current role to enable that through technology and to allow for it to happen as frequently or not as frequently as the relationship will require.
So a quick follow-up to that, I'm just curious about that. How are you using technology for that? I'd love to hear more about that.
It's a feature within, we have Halogen is our performance system, and it's a feature called one-to-one feedback. And it's quick and easy, and you can do it directly to your boss. You can do it to peers, and it lives within the system. And then actually, it even enables review time, because you can copy and paste and pull things in and not have to reinvent the wheel. You can also give high fives, right? So the little emoticons. If you want to let somebody know they did a great job for you, give them an emoticon and a quick, boy, thanks for that. We appreciated your help, which is a form of feedback. It's also a quick form of recognition. So we're trying to find creative ways to do that without making it burdensome or administrative.
Great, thank you. And there is a comment here from Ed Rankin. Thanks, Ed, for typing this in. I also wanted to let you know I got your email too while I was online here. And Maryanne, he just wanted to let you know that the tools you introduced and your discussion of how to use them were very valuable. So thank you very much for that. And for those that are interested in trying to write Q&A or comments, and if you're not used to Zoom, there is a function at the bottom of the screen. There should be, it's either at the top or the bottom, depending on your screen, that should say Q&A, and you should be able to go ahead and type in any other comments there. So I have another question as a follow-up, Maryanne. Would you mind going back 2 slides? I was very interested. Yes, putting it all together. Thank you. This was fascinating to see this graph right here and just how you explain the working. So, it looks like, you know, in session 1 and session 2, let's say that, you know, I think maybe I'm going back to my first question of just curious about the baby boomer and Gen X in the room on kind of the shorter periods of time in those. So I'm curious about, and it's not necessarily those two specific ones, just different personalities, I guess, in general. So I would love to hear a little bit more about how you work through those different personalities and viewpoints through this.
Yeah, so what's interesting about the action learning piece, and I also mentioned in the work cited the article to which you can get more detail about action learning. It's called Harnessing the Power of Action Learning by Michael Marquette. What you will do when you construct action learning teams is to assign them roles. And roles include things like facilitation leader, timer so that we stay on time with meetings, topic agenda. There's all kinds of roles to play on an action learning team, and we ask them to rotate. So what you get when you do that is no matter what generation you are, you should be rotating through these various roles, and then you get to see the different styles and perspectives on how people manage to those roles based on how they show up. So that's another way that you're going to manage that diversity in assigning them to these different types of roles within the action learning projects. The other way I've seen that work is not just on the teams, but the people that you engage when you put these teams together, meaning your thought leaders within the organization, your thought leaders from outside the organization, people who act as coaches or sponsors. The whole thing should have an eclectic mix, not only by generation. When it comes to that cross-functional team, the other thing that's very important is to consider gender, tenure, geography, and function. And so you're really creating a very eclectic mix. And more often than not, when I've done this, what the feedback we get is we are more similar than not. We share many of the same challenges irrespective of those things. And it really creates more camaraderie than anything else.
Great. And it looks like we have two more questions and then we'll be coming up on the hour. So I'd like to go ahead and get started with the last two. Thank you everybody for who's writing in. So question one, Maryanne, are you familiar with anyone using blockchain technology in OD applications?
You know what, we just started reading about blockchain technology. So I have not used it yet, but we are trying to get ourselves up to speed, particularly my CFO, our Chief Financial Officer, because apparently they're the way we're reading the trends is it'll have a very big impact on the world of finance. But yes, I haven't read up on that enough yet to answer the question.
Great, thank you. And then we have this last one here from Kamal. Thank you. Hi, Maryanne. Great insight for me is about the work hours. The myth does exist that millennials equals lazy / overindulgent. How might companies create policies and environments that enable them to flourish?
Yeah, it's a great question and a great observation. And I think it's, at least in my experience, it's much more about walking the talk than it is necessarily your policies. So the first part of the policy is you have to allow for it, right? And I've been in many organizations, and on paper, it says we have flexible work hours and summer hours and telecommuting and all that fun stuff. In practice, we don't walk the talk. And when people do that, they're pulled from it, they're punished for it in certain ways, so to speak, and it's more in the alignment of walking the talk. Where it works best in organizations is when you have the policies that allow for it and the leadership that enables it and supports it. And if you don't have those two things lined up, that's when you get into trouble.
Great. That is all that we have for tonight. And thank you, everybody, for participating. Those were fantastic. Oh, yes, please go ahead.
Just two quick sessions. So we did the questions already. I just wanted to put this out there. If you want to connect with me to continue the conversation, I'd love to do that. So that's my email. You can get me on LinkedIn or Twitter. And also just wanted to mention for any of us on this session who are in the coaching world, in August, ICF is having their Converge conference. If you're interested, just wanted to get the word out. It's August 23rd through 26th, and it's in Washington, D.C. My understanding is it's their international conference, which they only do every couple of years, and this is one of those years, so it's supposed to be a pretty phenomenal conference. I just wanted to mention that.
Great, thank you. You actually mentioned, did the two things I was going to ask is your contact information. Thank you so much for putting that up. And then just a quick plug, Maryanne and I were talking just before we signed on here, and it sounds like there's quite a few fielding folks that will be at ICF in August. So I would love to connect with anybody who is interested in attending that. And Maryanne, do you have any other last comments or thoughts before I close us out?
That'll do it. Just thanks so much for joining us tonight. I hope it was valuable.
Yes, absolutely. And Maryanne, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate this comprehensive presentation. And I have received, oh, it looks like Ed's going to be there. He says, thank you. And for those, if you found this information valuable, and barring any technology issues on my end, I should have this video up on our Alumni Relations YouTube channel, and feel free to share. And if you need any contact, any questions for me, you can contact me at alumnirelations@fielding.edu, and you all will be receiving a follow-up email with the survey. We would appreciate that so Mary can get some feedback. Other than that, thank you, everybody. Have a great evening, and we look forward to connecting online soon.
Awesome. Thanks for all your help, Hillary.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.